Welcome back. Here is an interesting question. How many Democrats out there are willing to say President Trump has been doing a good job? How many Republicans watching this right now will admit so far it is not going so well? According to the polls, if you believe the polls, not everyone does, we hear that, Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president in modern history at this point in their presidency. 44% approve of the job he's doing, according to a new CNN ORC poll. 55% say he isn't paying enough attention to the nation's most important problems. 51% don't think he is working hard enough to be effective. 56% don't think he has done a good job assembling a team of top advisors. But check this out. 85% of Republicans approve of the job he is doing, but only 8% of Democrats agree. Joining us tonight is Cheryl Wilson, the chairwoman of the Manatee County Democratic Party, Jack Brill, vice chair of the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Mark Weston, a presidential historian and author of The Runner-Up Presidency. And Mark, let me start with you, because you look at these things historically. When you compare the president's approval rating at this stage to presidents, let's say in the last 30 years, how do you, the numbers obviously show it's lower, but, what do you make of it?
There's no question. There's no honeymoon period this time. His approval ratings are far lower than that of previous presidents at this point in their administration. So a recent Wall Street Journal poll showed that 64% of Americans feel that Trump has done a poor or fair job in his first 100 days.
But there have been other very close elections. I mean, look at 2000. But at that point, George W. Bush did not have great approval ratings after his 100 days, but better than what Mr. Trump said.
Well, Trump promised a 100-day action plan with 10 major pieces of legislation. And what we've had in these first 100 days are more than 500 tweets, including the tweet that falsely accused President Obama of wiretapping Trump Tower. The only piece of legislation introduced was the health care fiasco. There's been nothing about infrastructure. And so there's been no major legislation passed, none in the first 100 days.
Well, here's the interesting point. According to that same CNN ORC poll, Congress has an approval rating of 24%. And Jack, the question to you is, my God, I shouldn't say my God, but my goodness, you have the House, you have the Senate. Why can't Republicans get anything past this Congress yet?
Well, there are a couple of different fronts. One, I personally like to see, there's probably a lot more going on than we all know about. And hopefully, you see different pieces of executive actions that have been taken on subjects that, where it wasn't front of mind and in front of the media and the public. So hopefully there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on. Two, since 2000 to 2016, on both sides, the world's changed. We've got the Tea Party, you've got the Democrats have the Progressives. There's been a lot more splinter inside the organizations. The days of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill debating all day and then having a drink together.
I've heard that the polls, the polls in terms of people on the more conservative, more liberal, parts of their party, they're farther apart than they used to be. Mm-hmm. Cheryl, you do look at certain things. I mean, the number of jobs created, he is outpacing recent presidents. Bill Clinton created the most jobs. President Trump is on his tail in terms of that. The stock market had quite a ride. It slowed down a little bit. So there have been signs that people feel better about the direction of the country now, as opposed to just a couple of months ago.
The 100 days in those issues has been a lot better for Donald Trump than Donald Trump's performance in the first 100 days has been. But I think we're already beginning to see the confidence level drop a bit. We're seeing the GNP drop a bit, and we're past that lag where for so long in the Obama administration, anything that was credited to the final days of the Bush administration. Now we're past that lag for the Obama administration to take credit, and Trump is going to have to accept what comes in the next 100 days or the next 3 months.
I'm wondering what the three of you think of some of the things that you hear about all the time. I don't know if they're the most important issues, but still you hear about this all the time. The executive orders. I mean, President Obama was so widely criticized for the executive orders that he's made, but and he was criticized by Donald Trump. No president has signed more executive orders in his first 100 days than Donald Trump. you know, same thing with golfing. He criticized President Obama for golfing. I don't know if any president has golfed more in their first 100 days. Jack, what do you make of that?
At least he's golfing on his own golf courses, so he's not having to pay for it with
Yeah, but we're
taxpayer
paying
money.
for
Everyone else is.
We're
Everyone
paying
else is.
millions to get him there.
Yeah, well,
And Secret Service is having to pay for the golf carts to follow him around.
I heard they rent golf carts. So, no, you know, if you look at the executive orders, the great majority of those executive orders are undoing the Obama administration executive orders. So, you know, we're spending a lot of political capital undoing with executive orders that probably should have, a great majority of them should have been put through Congress in the first place.
You know, Politico had a piece just in the last couple of days, though, that the executive orders are a lot of theater. A lot of them are Congress will send so many reports, or we will form a committee to look into the subject of the order. But as far as actual with really action on any of those topics, other than the TPP, there's not a lot that that has resulted in action. It's been holding up the order.
But I think you've got to look at the Veterans Administration Whistleblower Act that was signed this week. That has some significant teeth in giving protection to those folks for things that are not good that are happening. And you know, when you hear the stories of over the number of years where there was a whistleblower case, or there were multiple whistleblower cases where they'd have somebody, and that person that was the one who was the offender ends up getting promoted. You know, so those are things to look at.
While we have time in this segment, Mark, I wanted to read a quote to you from a USA Today column. You know, there are some people, Republicans, I mean, like John McCain, who support the president in certain areas, criticize him in others, but there are some people, no matter what the president does or says or tweets, they will stick with them, basically saying that the USA Today says that because he picks the right enemies, that is enough for them. Journalists, scientists, policy wonks, as long as they're the elites, they are upset. Trump's voters assume that the administration must be doing something right. The question is, you know, would those people ever move off those positions?
Reality has a way of biting you. So there's a lot of anti-intellectualism out in the country, and people don't want to hear about reports and scientists' conclusions. But reality exists, and it comes back to haunt people who ignore it.
All right. We are just getting started in this conversation. We'll pick it up right after we check the weather. Welcome back. Tomorrow marks President Trump's 100th day in office. What has he been able to achieve? What kind of roadblocks is he running into in Congress and the courts? Our guests tonight are Cheryl Wilson, the chairwoman of the Manatee County Democratic Party, Jack Brill, vice chair of the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Mark Weston, a presidential historian and author. Roadblocks. I mean, even when the president signs a lot of executive orders, passes some bills from Congress, you have the reoccurrence of the themes since the first day. General Flynn, the information coming out today that he did not ask or inform the Pentagon when he went to Russia and received money from RT, the Russian television network. It brings up the whole Russia investigation, which is continuing in both the Senate and the House and the FBI. Jack, how frustrating is it for Republicans here on the Sun Coast who want this president to do well, but have to endure these continuing headlines about this investigation?
And if you look at the Flynn investigation, if he was clearly told by the Pentagon back in 2014, you know, it's not the Trump administration's fault that, you know, this stuff happened long before the election. And, you know, stuff like that, you know, that's his responsibility. He needs, you know, whatever the investigations bring out, he's got to accept the consequences either way. Well,
and apparently the Pentagon specifically said to General Flynn, if you're going to work for these foreign governments, you have to report it. And he didn't. And that is up very much to the vetting of the Trump administration to find that out.
And it raises the question, even though he continued to get security clearances from the Obama administration, it's from my understanding, if you go from the Pentagon to another agency of the government like the White House, you have to get reviewed once again, and it raises the question about the vetting that the Trump team made of this person when all of that information was out there.
It's worth remembering the Obama administration fired General Flynn from his duties, and yet the Trump administration promoted him to be National Security Advisor.
Okay. North Korea. I'm interested in your take of this because potentially this is an incredibly scary situation. And, I've heard people talk about this. We always knew that North Korea was a bad situation. It one day could be a crisis, but it's becoming an increasing crisis quickly. And I'm just wondering what your takes are.
And I think it's being fueled by all the attention it's getting by that leader who likes and craves attention of the world. I think the Trump administration, in the meetings with the Chinese leadership, now you've seen that they've stopped a couple shipments from North Korea. They are hopefully back channeling diplomatically. And even though that's unpredictable as the regime is in North Korea, doing it diplomatically, the Trump administration did the right thing, lit China. China's got the most influence over these folks. They're the only ones that may have influence over them.
You have a really scary dynamic, though, because you have two world leaders who like to have the attention of the world on them. And that's exactly what you're looking at with Trump. He's somewhat defending a 20-year-old despot or a 27-year-old despot, but he very much is taking it to the brinksmanship game because that's how they both respond.
Mark, this is deadly serious issues, but the question is, the more we talk about North Korea, the less we're talking about Russia, what's happening or what's not happening in Congress.
Things can go so wrong so fast. The city of Seoul, South Korea, is a city of 20 million people, only a half an hour from the North Korean border. They can fire artillery and kill literally millions of South Koreans within minutes. So even if the North Koreans were to do something reckless and suicidal, and we could squelch this regime probably in an hour, but in that 1 hour, they can kill literally millions of South Koreans.
All right, switching topics, healthcare. Jack, I'm wondering what your take is, because there was an effort this past week, again, to resurrect a Republican healthcare bill. They have put it off. There have been some people who have said, you know what, this is going to be really hard for Republicans to pass because the Republicans can't agree on the approach. Would you wish that the administration would push forward with this, or let's get on to other things?
No, I think it should be done simultaneously. Let's keep working it through until it's done the best possible plan for the American people, and from a tax or from a healthcare standpoint and a cost standpoint. So if it takes more than a couple weeks, that's okay.
Does it take more than 7 years, though? We've been hearing this from the Republican Party for 7 years, that the Obamacare needs to be repealed and needs to be replaced. And now they have the president, they have the House of Representatives, and they have the Senate, and they still don't have a plan.
And if you decide to insure people with pre-existing conditions, you're going to have something like Obamacare.
Yeah, but they're also, yes, but I'll go back to the Nancy Pelosi statement. If you need to pass the bill to read the thing. It's 2,500 pages. It affects every other agency. I mean, you think about the Affordable Health Care Act. They're even making. Remember when the government took over student loans from the corporations? They're getting interest. They're making money, towards Obamacare from interest. I mean, there's so much complexity in this thing.
One point there, and then let's move on, because with the debate over Obamacare, that took close to a year, and there were a lot of hearings in both the House and the Senate. They were talking about putting that bill up for a vote this week without a single hearing.
And I guess they're working behind the scenes with the Freedom Caucus. They're getting a little closer. If it takes 6 months or a year to do it, let's do it right.
But the difficulty there is that in many ways, what happens with health care and the subsidies is dependent upon what you could do in terms of tax reform, because they were counting on the savings from health care to fund tax reform, which is not there. And the question now is, will corporations and wealthy Americans and other Americans get tax cuts that are not paid by offsets?
And that is something that, as they're going through, through this process, that has to be looked at very carefully, because obviously, you need to be competitive in the world from a corporate tax standpoint. Simplifying from 7 to 3 brackets, and a very significant issue is making sure you're competitive to get the $2 or $3 trillion offshore money back into this country, into circulation.
Sure, I'll give you the last word.
But to answer your question, Alan, no, they won't. Probably, but we don't know because the big buildup to the tax question, to the tax reform, came in the 97th or 98th day so that it could be addressed before that 100 days.
And we just have a couple of seconds left, but Mark, there are people who want their tax cuts. In essence, they're not going to care whether or not it's offset.
If it's not offset, the deficit will go through the roof and we'll have inflation, so we need to offset it.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, Florida's standardized testing system. Welcome back. What can the first 100 days about the next 100 days tell in the Trump administration history tell us? Our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. So, Mark, let me get your take in terms of, do you think anything will be different in the second 100 days of the Trump administration?
Well, there will be new legislative proposals, but nothing fundamentally different. One of the most insightful comments about this whole period came from Ohio Republican Governor John Kasich. In his opinion, the best thing about the last 100 days was President Trump's flip-flops. He feels that NATO is no longer obsolete. China is not a currency manipulator, which it hasn't been for years. This reality TV star is discovering the reality that he's in charge of, and he seems to be flip-flopping on issues like dismantling NAFTA, which shouldn't be totally dismantled, and this is a good thing.
You know, is this just a situation where you have a new president learning the job? All new presidents have to learn the job. On the other hand, when you talk about John Kasich, some people are saying, well, boy, he's out there a lot, he's traveling a lot, and some people even suspect if things don't go well, he might challenge the president in 4 years.
That is so far away. You know, let's get through the next 100 days. But I think you've got to look at, you know, brand new administration, not a hugely political background. Thought President Trump really gave a great State of the Union. You know, hopefully, you know, as you go, we've got the whole year to do it. 97% of Republicans have voted for President Trump, and polls have said they'd vote for him again. You know, you got to give, I call it rookie mistakes. You know, there's a new world, and there's been some very serious issues that have gone on in the last 100 days, and there's going to continue to be some very serious issues. So I think what is a real positive is, you may call it flip-flopping, I call it having some, you know, back up and having some thought process that, okay, we need to look at all this, and that's a positive that he's willing to do that, and the administration's willing to do
Cheryl,
that.
what is the mood of local Democrats? Because you hear there's a lot of energy out there, but there's no candidate to rally on right now, and there's no way for Democrats in the House and Senate to block anything.
Democrats are more fired up than any time that I have been involved with the party in Manatee County. I say, not in a joking way, that we're busier right now than we were October 15th, prior to the election. But we are seeing people come off the sidelines. We're seeing people who have not been politically active before saying, I just can't sit on the sidelines anymore. We also are seeing Democrats in local and state elections as well. But Trump is the catalyst that has brought them all out there.
All right, thank you all. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the Florida Standards Assessment. State legislators are considering a range of reforms for the exams, including moving them to the final 3 weeks of the school year, eliminating certain tests, and allowing high school students who do well on the SAT and ACT to bypass state tests. We asked you what you would like to see changed, and Tommy Homer writes, SAT is the only test they need. Let the teachers teach. Nicole Cusimano writes, stop hurting our teachers with VAM tied to testing. VAM is used to determine raises for teachers. Let teachers do what they were trained to do and stop taking the love of learning away from our children. And Tracy Damron Roel writes, until people stop looking at school grades as an indicator of anything outside of socioeconomic status, nothing will change. Let us know what you think about President Trump's first 100 days. Visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Cheryl Wilson is the chairwoman of the Manatee County Democratic Party. Jack Brill is the vice chair of the Republican Party of Sarasota. And Mark Weston is an author and presidential historian.